But in reality, his claim to be the Son of Man is just as much of a claim to deity as his claim to be the Son of God is. In Mark chapter 14, verses 60 to 64, this is the account of Jesus's trial before the Sanhedrin, before his crucifixion. We read, quote, "Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?' But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' 'I am,' said Jesus, 'and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven.' The high priest tore his clothes. 'Why do we need any more witnesses?' he asked. 'You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?' They all condemned him as worthy of death." End quote. Jesus' response combines Psalm chapter 110, verse 1, and Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 to 14. Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 to 14 says, quote, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed." End quote. Dr. Michael S. Heiser, from the article "What's Ugaritic Got to Do with Anything?" on logos.com, said, quote, "Throughout the Ugaritic text, Baal is repeatedly called the one who rides the clouds, or the one who mounts the clouds. The description is recognized as an official title of Baal. No angel or lesser being bore the title. As such, everyone in Israel who heard this title associated it with a deity, not a man or an angel. Part of the literary strategy of the Israelite prophets was to take this well-known title and attribute it to Yahweh in some way. Consequently, Yahweh, the God of Israel, bears this descriptive title in several places. In the Old Testament, Isaiah chapter 19, verse 1, Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 26, Psalm chapter 68, verse 33, and Psalm chapter 104, verse 3. For a faithful Israelite, then, there was only one God who rode on the clouds, Yahweh." End quote. Here's why the Sanhedrin found Jesus' claim blasphemous. First, Jesus claimed to be Daniel 7's Son of Man. Daniel 7's Son of Man would A, be given authority, glory, and sovereign power. B, would be worshipped by people all over the world. And C, would have a kingdom that would never end. Secondly, he would come in judgment riding on the clouds. He's the cloud rider. Riding the clouds in judgment is Yahweh's job. Thirdly, he would be seated at the right hand of God. To sit at God's right hand is to sit on God's throne. To sit on God's throne is to claim equality with God. So Jesus claimed to be Daniel 7, Son of Man, who would A, be given authority, glory, and sovereign power. He would be worshipped by people. B, would be worshipped by people all over the world, and C, would have a kingdom that would never end. This is a pretty exalted figure that Daniel is describing here. And Jesus, the Son of Man, would come riding on the clouds, something that the Old Testament prophets in many different places said that's what Yahweh did. Yahweh's chariot is in the clouds. But Jesus says, "Hey, Caiaphas, I'm going to come on the clouds. I'm going to be riding Yahweh's chariot." And to dig it in, to just make things even worse for himself, he said he would be seated at God's right hand. To sit at God's right hand is to sit on God's throne. To sit on God's throne is to claim equality with God. The only way Jesus could make his claim to be God more explicit is if he used the three explicit words, "I am God." That's the only way I can conceive that he could have made it any more obvious, is just to say the three words, I am God. Excuse me. Here's an interesting side note. Perhaps the most blatant claim to deity comes from coming from the very lips of Jesus, comes from the gospel that most New Testament scholars say has the lowest Christology.